Welcome to Podcast 83, a regular look at the news, stories, and trends related to Michigan's 83 counties from the Michigan Association of Counties.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Podcast 83. Today we are joined by Madeline, Samantha, and Deena, as usual, giving our weekly update on what's going on in the happenings in Lansing. Not a lot last week. Most of the legislature was up on Mackinac Island for the Detroit Chamber Conference. But let's kind of look forward for the next 20, 30 days that we anticipate, right, Deena, that the legislature will be meeting, kind of primarily working on budget and other things. So how about an update on the next few weeks here, what we expect?
Yeah. Absolutely. So right now we are waiting for them to finalize each and every one of their budgets. And we believe that'll happen sometime within the next 3 weeks. They're only planning on being here for 3 weeks to get all of that done. I know the appropriations members have been meeting on a regular basis and are really trying to get everything finalized. So that's taking a lot of the air out of the room at this moment. But because they're behind closed doors and they're working on the negotiation and trying to reconcile both the House and the Senate versions of the budget with what the governor wants, they are running policy committees. And we haven't seen this many policy committees posted in a long time. So we're grateful that during that lag period, while they're working on the budget, they are also going to start taking up pieces of legislation and moving those through the process. Because they're only here for 3 weeks, though, and there hasn't been a lot of policy committee activity, we don't expect much of it to make it all the way through the process before they break for summer.
Yeah, so let's just recapping the budget, just a high overview. What are we looking at in the budget? Looking forward to, hoping for. Just a quick recap. I know we've done it a few times, but just briefly, obviously, revenue sharing is the biggest item that we typically are working on, right?
Love to talk about revenue sharing. I actually just talked to Senator Cherry this morning about it. So, yes, the House and the Senate have two different versions of revenue sharing that they need to negotiate out. The governor, as we've stated before, the governor did a recommendation for a percentage-based increase to our statutory revenue sharing. Um, the House, on the other hand, took our revenue sharing trust fund model and incorporated that into the budget. So they allocated 8% of the first 4% of the sales tax towards statutory revenue sharing. Same distribution model as we've seen before, it's just different numbers. They also did a public safety trust fund model in the budget, which is 1.5% of the first 4% of the state sales tax that would go toward violence prevention and tackle high crime areas across the state. Most of that is primarily for your larger urban cities that are having, some crime problems. It's not going to mean much to a county budget, but it is in there and spends more money than the House version or the Senate version because of that 1.5% that's added in there. And mind you, in a budget bill, this is boilerplate language. This is distribution. This is 1 year only, so it's not going to accomplish the um, predictability and the stability in that fund unless we get the policy bills done. The Senate, on the other hand, did something similar. They took our revenue sharing trust fund model, put it in the boilerplate language, but called it 9.1% of the first 4% of the state sales tax, a significant increase. That's about a $52 million increase. So, with that $52 million, they decided to reallocate how that money is distributed out to the counties. And they base that on an inverse relationship to your taxable value. Now, it's an increase for everyone. And that large amount, that $52 million increase for counties, is significant enough that every county will get an increase from 2024 numbers. They will get a significant increase, some a little bit more than others, because, like I said, it's an inverse relationship to your taxable value. So those counties that have higher taxable values is going to get less of an increase than those with low taxable value. They did not. They did not include the public safety trust fund percentage. What they did was allocate about $15 million for public safety. So it's just, it's looking pretty good, but they just have to come to an agreement on what those numbers are gonna be. And for us, the Senate plan is much, much better.
Yeah, so three different approaches, Senate plans better. They're all kind of working from the same total dollar figure though at this point, right? We didn't see a lot of variability from the consensus revenue estimating conference, so the dollar figure is there.
The state general
Yeah.
fund,
Yeah.
yes,
Yes.
yes.
So
So there's
we're
enough
not
revenue there to do it.
right, right. That's where I was going with that. Well, that's good. Um, so then moving on, you talked about policy committees meeting, and I'll kind of open this up to the three of you. What about, are there any bills we're kind of paying attention to over the next 2, 3 weeks here that we want to highlight? I'm sure there are, but what are maybe some ones that we want to talk about that, while we don't anticipate a lot getting done, maybe some testimony or possible movement on.
Well, I can pipe in. The Senate Local Government Committee is gonna meet tomorrow. Well, whenever this podcast airs, so if it airs tomorrow, it'll be on Tuesday. And they're gonna take up House Bill 5203. And that bill was originally introduced by Kelly Breen that would allow um, a county to rehire sheriff's department without any, or a retiree that retired to rehire them without any real restrictions. So right now in the state law, it says, well, if it's 1,000 hours, if they work less than 1,000 hours in one calendar year in a 12-month period, then that's fine. The county can rehire them. Well, the sheriffs want to be able to rehire because they're having such a hard time finding law enforcement. They want the ability to rehire retirees who still let them collect some of their pension benefits, and pay them to get out on the streets and help with law enforcement. So that bill made it through the House, no problem. But we're working on an amendment right now that would get rid of that 1,000 hour restriction and then have it apply to any employee, because we know how hard it is for county government right now to hire. And sometimes you need that expertise in different departments to come back and help teach newer generations of employees what needs to be done. So we're hopeful that that gets moved through the process this week.
Yeah, definitely. It's tough for public entities to compete at the private sector these days too, and getting folks to work for government has been a challenge, and obviously in the law enforcement. And so I think that would be a helpful option for locals to be able to go back and do that again. Any other bills that we're watching? Sam, Madeline, anything you guys want to highlight, or even outside of bills, any issues that we want to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, not legislation, but certainly a budget priority of ours and something we've talked about at length at the policy summit last December and on this podcast is the Medicaid inmate exclusion policy. It's reforms that we need and what we can do at the state level. So MDHHS is in the process of applying for what's called the Section 1115 reentry waiver, which would allow county jail inmates, juvenile detention detainees, and then also MDOC inmates to have their uninsured healthcare costs covered. They would have otherwise been eligible for Medicaid. Upon incarceration, you're no longer eligible, which, as we know, is incredibly costly to counties. MDHHS is in the third step of their 6-step process towards applying and implementing the waiver approval. They're on environmental assessment and design is their most recent update. So they're, evaluating what are the needs at the MDOC and the county jail level. What does that application request need to include? I know they said they've been consulting with other states that have had their approval, or I'm sorry, their application approved. So they're chugging along. MAC, CMH Association, Sheriff's Association, still working together to get the department to include our wants in that proposal. And again, there's that 30.5 million in the executive recommendation and the House DHHS budget to cover the uninsured costs of jail inmates.
Yeah, right. Something we've talked about for a long time, especially at NACO conferences, is this Medicaid exclusion policy. Nice to see there is some movement on fixing it, at least in the state of Michigan. As you mentioned, other states have applied and been successful in getting those waivers. And while it's a little disappointing to hear we're only in step 3 of 6, it is movement. Hopefully once the application is in it fairly quickly, because the feds have had a chance to see these applications a few times. They shouldn't have to spend a lot of time going through it, but of course you never know. So nice update there. And it's nice to see that there's some dollars in the budget to cover some costs here in the interim until that maybe approval comes through in the next year, 2, 3 years. Well, at least it's in the budget for the next year. So, okay, great. Thanks for that update. Anything else anyone wants to throw out there?
I will say I don't believe there's going to be a hearing this week, but something kind of bigger that I do anticipate movement before they break for the summer is that Michigan Voting Rights Act package. We've had some stakeholder meetings with the Senate policy team, and we received new drafts just this morning. So I do believe that they'll leave that Senate Elections Committee before they break, which is good news.
And what do those bills do? Just a refresher.
Those bills, they are meant to codify the Federal Voting Rights Act. But the way they were initially written puts a massive burden on our local clerks, and it could potentially expose local governments to some legal challenges and lawsuits. But in these stakeholder meetings, I think we've made some great progress to more closely mirror the Federal Voting Rights Act. So yeah, we've made some progress and got to review those drafts more closely. Just got them this morning, but we'll keep you posted on some movement.
All right, thanks. Any other updates?
Well, I mean, there's one more. There's one more that drive to gather signatures for the Citizens for Local Choice ballot initiative. Um, that initiative was designed to take away large-scale wind and solar siting authority from the Public Service Commission and retain it at the local level. They were not successful in getting enough signatures to get it on the 2024 ballot, but I do believe they are still moving forward to try and get it on the 2026 ballot, and gathering up signatures. So anybody out there who has petitions, make sure you send them back in. Um, but Madeline, what do you think they need to be doing in the meantime? Because this
Yeah,
goes into
so
effect when?
for those counties who do handle zoning, if you were holding out hope that this would be successful, unfortunately, come November of this year of 2024, that law takes effect. So you will need to get your plans in order. Um, Dr. Sarah Mills and Madeline Kroll from the University of Michigan have put together an excellent article that will be in our June magazine later this month, that details the 3 paths that a local unit of government may take moving forward. So stay tuned for that. But you're going to have to get your ducks in a row in the coming months. Either adopt an ordinance, don't adopt an ordinance. It'll be up to each individual municipality.
Yeah, good advice there to at least be somewhat proactive before that goes into effect. Great. I think the only other thing we have is an update on our policy summit. Registration is open for a one-day policy summit here in Lansing. The date of that is June 25th. As I said, here in Lansing at the AC Hotel, which is it's in East Lansing. So hopefully folks will register for that. Some great topics, kind of a one day quick hitter kind of conference to update you on information, various issues that are going on right now and in the long term. So hopefully folks are registering for that. And then of course our fall conference will be coming up end of September up in Grand Traverse County. So with that, unless there's anything else, everyone have a great week and we will see you next week.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of Podcast 83.